Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Goose Knob Show. There are a few hot takes I want to rattle off real quick, if I can remember them all. Number one. Well, okay, let me just list them out, and then I'll expand on them. So, number one, Starbucks is lazy. Number two, I don't like apologists of the current state of society, and I think those are the two ones, and I don't know how they're connected, but maybe there's a connection in there somewhere. Okay, let's go. So Starbucks. Have you ever been into a Starbucks? Have you ever been in one recently? I don't know. They seem pretty poorly put together, honestly, and also the quality just seems. I don't know. It seems. Let's do a little analysis of Starbucks real quick. So, I think what really clued me into thinking that there's a problem with Starbucks is the fact that you look at the pastry, the little pastry trinket counter, right? All their little pastries and goodies or whatever. Just looks super low quality, and I don't know. The outside of the Starbucks, it looks sleek, it looks modern, it looks bleh, whatever. But you go inside, I guess it looks nice, right? It looks okay. But from what I've noticed, the further you walk into a Starbucks, the worse it gets, and the more closer you look, the more you realize that this is a I don't know, some sort of feel like it's a business that's being kind of barely held together by a few like really incompetent people, and not the people from the top up, right? I think the model works, but like the people who built this model, they made it so okay. We have a system, right? The system is the Starbucks. The input to the system is some liberal arts person who can't find a job, right? Or, someone who doesn't really have many practical skills and, I don't know, probably isn't very competent with, with technical stuff. And you can say, oh, that's mean. It's like, okay, I don't know. There's got to be some study out there looking at how many girls in the liberal arts can cook. Like, I can cook. I'm an engineer. I can cook. I can do I can do tons of practical things, and I can probably do way less practical things than like an actual tradesman, right? They're way better at like doing things in life than I am, most likely. So if a tradesman can do things better than I am, and I know how to do a ton of stuff, then I don't know, someone who lives in their head all day. I don't know. Seems to me like it's not everybody, obviously. I have tons of friends in the liberal arts. But what I'm saying is on average, I feel like many of them don't have very practical skills. And so anyway, my point is Starbucks, the business model, is a baby-proof little business thing where it's like, oh, I don't know. You need to have, it needs to be idiot proof. It needs to be, incompetence proof and whatever, because the college to Starbucks pipeline in the liberal arts is a real and big thing. Anyway, this talk is hinging on pridefulness. Anyway, my point is, I think that there's way too many people in the liberal arts. That's kind of where I'm coming from here. And I don't know. I think calling yourself someone who studied, I studied in the arts and the College of Arts and Sciences, having like some really soft, not even science, soft, they call it a science, it's not a science, it's just, a soft mush. It's a soft, I read some books and I wrote a written multiple choice test, right? That's not science, right? Making that this on the same level as physics and chemistry, like, that's just stupid. The physics and chemists put in way more effort than 99% of people in these other programs. So to say that they're equivalent or comparable, I don't know, man. You're making a stretch, I'd say. So anyway, whatever. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, forget it. Whatever. I don't know. I feel like there's a dormant resentment of the liberal arts that's deep, that I shoved deep down inside of my subconscious, that I haven't fully reconciled with. Probably, honestly, I don't know. Oh boy. Well, I don't know. See, we're both learning things today. I'm learning things about myself, and there's got to be at least one new thought that you've had over the course of this podcast. There's got to be at least one, even if it's inconsequential. There's one thing that you've probably learned. Anyway, enough defending myself. Let's go back into the real point. Starbucks. Oh yeah. So Starbucks, it looks like a system, like a business model. It's designed for like little kids, little incompetent, children, adult children who need to be handheld through an entire process. So I don't know. Let's start at the pastry line, right? The pastries, they look like it's I don't know. It just seems like idiot proof. It looks like there's a bunch of boxed pastries that they shove in an unappetizing, little behind some unappetizing glass, and you can tell that it looks like it's been sitting there for days, right? It's not fresh. It's held together by preservatives and whatever, and it's just there. The thing that's even more disturbing is like the breakfast burritos and the other the other savory foods that are there that look like, wow, you're actually selling that? It looks like I don't know. You can tell it's not fresh, and even if it is, it is fresh, which I'd see I could not see how that's fresh, but let's say it is fresh. It still looks like it isn't. I don't know. So from my interpretation, from my layman's perspective, it looks like, they just tacked on the food portion of this coffee shop, and the way that they do it is just by importing in a bunch of preservative-laden, wheat products, and then just having it decay behind a counter. So it looks like a fully fleshed coffee shop. And my point here, the big point I'm trying to make, man, I'm sounding unhinged here. But the point I'm trying to make is that Starbucks professes itself to be a real institution that requires, respect and whatever, and you should trust us. But really, it's a bunch of cardboard. It's a bunch of, it's a structure made of cardboard and string and duct tape that is trying to look like a legitimate thing. And then you say, well, but I like the Starbucks coffee, and I like the trinkets, and I like the pastries and whatever. It's like, the coffee is just, they've got processes for it, right? There's just simple processes that the people follow, and there's, you put in X amount of syrup and da-da-da-da, and it's all just, syrup and sugar and whatever, right? And that's another foolproof type of thing. It's just like, it's sugar water, sugar this and that, sludge. And sure, they can make a lot, but it's just a simple recipe book. But anyway, I think I've made the point about it being a cardboard structure. But then you'd say, well, Gustav, if it's just a cardboard structure, then how is it making money? Why is it so successful? Why do I like going there? Well, the reason is because, you know who's holding up this entire institution? The food scientists. There's probably like, I don't know what the market evaluation of Starbucks is, but like there's probably tens to hundreds to maybe even billions of dollars going into probably the food science to this stuff. You know, they're trying to make something that's as addictive as possible, that's as simple to make as possible, without any drugs, except for caffeine and sugar. So essentially what they do is, I don't know, they create an incredibly compelling line of drinks and such. And if you've ever been to Starbucks recently, it's like the drinks are great. The drinks are amazing. The drinks taste really good. But it's not because they're trying to make it look like a pop-up, or not a pop shop, like a mom and pop coffee shop and blah 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 and whatever, and this is legitimate and blah blah blah. But really what it is a bunch of incompetent people behind a counter with a very intricately designed business model that is designed to, it's designed for people who, like an idiot could do it. God, I made this point too much. I'm sure there are many great people who work at Starbucks. I'm just saying that the way that it's designed is, it's probably a very, not simple, but it's just anyway, my point being, it's trying to look like a legitimate business, but really what it is it's not a coffee company. It's like a drug company in a sense, where the drug is a designer, chemical mixture. It's not a compound. It's not a unique kind of molecule that they're using, right? Like what you'd find in methamphetamine or whatever. Not necessarily, but it's a mixture, which is just a combination of multiple other parts that aren't really something when in their individual components, but put them together, it's something very different, right? So it's a drug company that uses mixtures instead of compounds, I would argue, because there's probably so much iteration and thought that goes into, how do we create the best drink imaginable? How do we create something that'll get people coming back? And that's how they do it, And the other thing is, how do they create a unappetizing, disgusting pastry behind a glass thing that's obvious it's been sitting there for days and days and days, and still get people to buy? It's like, I'm gonna be honest, fellas. I bought a pastry from there, and I'm gonna be honest, it was pretty good. I don't know. I don't know how I got it, but I got 3 Starbucks cards, just burning a hole in my wallet, and I was like, you know what, I gotta use this up before I forget about them. But yeah, the pastries are good, even though they look horrible. It's clear that they're full of preservatives. It's the food scientists did a good job, and I gotta say, it would be good to have another one. I would love another good little Starbucks pastry in my stummy. It would be a nice little thing, right? And the hot cocoa with peppermint I ordered, that tasted really good too. So anyway, I hope I've made my point, whatever that point may be. But yeah, what was the second thing I wanted to talk about? I want to talk about this Starbucks thing a little more, but I don't want to forget about the original point. The original point is, I hate apologists of like the current system, because I mean, when you're at like kind of, average level politics, people have like, it's not like ultra extreme, but they have, just like, I don't know. I'd say that people have like mid-level radical ideas. They say, "Oh, I want to change this." Oh, like for example, leftists, they're like, "Oh, we want free college and we want, free this and free healthcare and free blah blah blah." It's like, that's kind of a radical policy, but it's really not based on anything, and it's really, it's just like, oh, it's stupid, It's like there isn't really much thought that goes into that. You can say, "Oh, there is a lot of thought." It's like, no, there isn't. No, there isn't. Sure, great. When you go further up, the person who actually suggested that in the first place, yeah, sure. There's probably some bigger justification and whatever, but no. The boots on the ground, 100 IQ, 110, 120 IQ people who are peddling these points, they don't have a good reason to create stuff like this, or to peddle that point. They haven't really done much thought on this. The thought that they've done in terms of looking at the third and fourth order consequences, looking at the actual, the ethics behind it, like, oh, what does this actually mean? Like, oh, maybe the system of college is actually a bad thing, and not it's obvious that people who peddle points around, the average discourse, right? They're stupid points. They're stupid points. But they're radical. That's my point. They're a little radical. They want bigger change, at least as far as I've seen. But once you get higher level, I would say, once you get higher level in the political discourse, I think something interesting happens, because there's like three different, there's right, left, and then there's people who like the status quo at the center of like just, average level politics. And that's like the stupidest group, I would say, because they don't really, well, it's either stupid or smart, because either people don't care about politics and they care about their jobs, which is admirable, I'd say, but then there's also people who just just advocates for the current system, but then they don't really apply any policies and really say much about, oh, what should we do given my support for the average system. They just kind of go with the flow. But as you go higher in the political level, I think that you notice that there are many intellectual people who actually very heavily support and provide a intellectual backbone for what the status quo is, which is really funny, because you never see this at the average levels of politics. You never see this at low-level discourse. You never see low-level discourse talking about why is a foreign expansion of the United States military industrial complex, why is that a good thing? Why did we need to go into the Middle East? Why did we need to stay there for like 30 years or whatever? Oh, why do we need to do all this other political science stuff and whatever? Why do we need to why do we take in it like, a world policeman type of, why do we have a world policeman ideology rather than like isolationism of the 1900s, early 1900s? And there are many people, there are tons of people who have a very, like a radical, you think that radical right-wingers and radical left-wingers are radical? Like, these people are like just as, if not more, radical than those people. And they basically, I'd say that they see many of the things, or if not most of the things, in the current society, and then they try and justify it as best they can with the facilities that they have, the faculties or facility, whatever. So the way that they with their mental power, with their creativity and whatever, they come up with as many justifications as they can, and they create like a semi-intellectual backing to it, which is interesting. But I've seen this multiple times. Like, I saw one guy. I mean, he was, well, Okay, I don't want to give too much information, but I've seen people who have supported, and these are smart people, right? But what they're doing is they're just, they're being apologists for the current system. That's what they're doing. And essentially, like I've seen people who like have been like intellectually giving out a case to me for why the like a one world government is like the best thing to do. And I've seen people who have said like, who have given as boring and as, the most boring and intellectually, like like an idea that isn't new at all, and everyone's kind of, the default option, in the modern society on like the Civil War and World War I and World War II and da 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 da. They choose the default option for everything, and then they argue as much as they possibly can to bring it up. And it's like they make good points. I don't think they're right at all, though, but they do make, probably as good of an argument as you possibly could for this type of stuff. And the point I'm making there is that it's just kind of that's a very funny archetype, because I think most people, they kind of interact with people who are, in the intellectual spheres too, like people who are like kind of opposed to the system. And maybe that's just the spheres that I've been a part of. And it's been rarer to find like neolib apologists, but that's just funny to see, It's very funny to see. Like, oh yes, no, gosh, yeah, but there's a lot of these people who are creeping under the woodwork, and maybe I think that honestly, thinking about it a little more, like every smart person who hasn't completely checked out of society probably thinks like this. Like, honestly, every smart person that probably, is an advocate of our society to some level, isn't someone who wants to see large change, like people who say, oh yeah, we need to support our democracy and we need to support this, and you know what, I like the way things are going, people who aren't saying like, oh, we need to build a Christian theocracy, or we need to return on a mass scale to Catholic values, or we need to instill communism in the United States, or we need to demolish our democratic system for a more decentralized, socialist type of thing. People who like advocate, people who don't advocate for stuff like that, and who are very smart, I think that all of them probably have very intricate justifications for everything that that exists within our system, I would say. Probably. It seems to me that that's a likely outcome. Because, I don't know, if you're smart, then why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you be thinking about every possible outcome? Or not outcome, but like why wouldn't you try and justify your own beliefs? Because I think everyone thinks that they're right. I think that's St. Thomas Aquinas. Everyone thinks that they're a good person or something. I think, and I'm butchering his quote, but everyone thinks that they're a good person. And I mean, if there's nothing really that forces you to change your perspective, then you're probably just going to justify the worldview and the place that you exist, especially if you're just, an average political thinker. Then you're going to just justify it. And since you're smart, you're going to come up with pretty good justifications, which is just going to make it so that it's harder for you to budge. And it's going to make you more, more accepting of the world that you live in. And I think the flaw or the risk in that is that it makes you blind to what is going to, or it makes you blind to the trends. It makes you blind to how society changes, because society isn't static. I've talked about this in many different episodes of this podcast, but, we exist within a dialectic, and the way that things change. And I'd say that there isn't an end of history. It will always change. It will always be morphing and adapting. And I think that everyone who's a supporter of our society thinks that, we've reached the end. Oh, we've reached the end of this and that. It's like 100 years ago, people thought that we reached the end of what science could do. We reached the end of technological and intellectual progress. They probably thought, oh, we reached the end of politics. Things will never change. Oh, we reached the end of this and that. It's like, no, you think that we reached the end because we live in a somewhat stable time, but stability changes, and cultures shift, and the constant throughout human history is shifting adaptations, and and I don't think it's really reasonable to say that things will just stay constant, but that's what I'd say most average intellectuals, or maybe not average, but apologists of the system who are extremely smart. Let's call them just system apologists, and let's assume that they're extremely intelligent. The system apologists, let me grab my thoughts here again. Let me collect myself. System apologists. Like the system apologists of any time think that they're in the end of history. Things will never change because there's no disconnect between what the ideal is and where they actually are, right? If you just tacitly accept, the default state is to just accept where you are and say, this is it, this is good. The default state is to be a system apologist. But it takes effort, and it takes, creativity to think outside of the system, which most people are not creative. And maybe it's a bad thing too, because hell, if you deviate from the system too much, I'd say, then you run the real risk of causing horrible atrocity, right? Like communism and Nazism and all this stuff, whatever. But system apologism is the default state, and since it's the default state, most people go to it, especially intellectuals. And since many of these intellectuals, maybe not most, but many, if not or most or whatever, of these intellectuals just default to system apologism, just like everyone else in society. Because they do that, they'll also justify it. Because if you're really smart, you better justify your beliefs. You can't just say, oh, this is something that I believe, and then not think about it. You're probably going to be thinking about it a lot. And especially men think about politics a ton. Not just like, oh, I care about the social things. No, they care about the structures of society and how it all operates. And I read a data science book that kind of confirms that all. But anyway, my point is, they're thrust into a situation where they just say, oh, you know what, I'll accept the belief of what the society says. And then they accept the belief, and then I think it starts a positive feedback loop where their intellect ends up self-reinforcing the belief system that they already have. And then they believe that their belief system is rock solid, given years and years of justification of it. And then once all that is done, then they end up looking at society through the eyes of someone who has, put a considerable amount of effort thinking about the politics of the society and then justifying it. And doing so, I'd say many system apologists, even if they have small quandaries of society, will think that they live in essentially a utopia of sorts, or maybe the best society you could live in, or, the end of history. something that where nothing really new needs to be done, you know? Now, obviously, there's a grand narrative at play, you know? And in the current society, it's like the narrative of the democracy, right? We need to save the democracy. There are these evil actors, you know, like the Nazis and the white supremacists and the Nazis and the Nazis that are trying to overthrow our government, just like January 6th. But we need to trust in our democratic process and our democracy, and that'll be the way that we get through all this. You know, we just need to stick to our principles of our utopian society, and things will work out. We got to do democracy harder. And if it requires some tough love, then so be it. We'll just throw them away, throw them into the courts. And our court democracy, that'll solve everything. Anyway. But the point there is that they're really good at justifying this stuff. And it's just funny to hear them talk about this type of stuff, because you just hear the most wild arguments, you know, something that is just like, wow, you got that from that? Like, your principles are like insane. Because I don't know, I find that I don't know, if you think our society is in a good spot, if you think it's a good place, like, you're stupid. It's like, sure. Our society has done an incredible amount. I'd say that we're extremely stable. There's a lot of very good things in our society. And to say that, like, oh, it's just hell on, well, it is hell on earth to an extent, but it's also, you know, it's not the worst it can be. And you gotta accept that for what it is too, right? But you can't also say that it's like perfect. But it's just funny. It's insane to hear people whose values align exactly with our society. You know, the people who would like listen to Bill Gates and the guy you will eat the bugs and you will be happy and you will own nothing. Like, people like that, you know, the ruling class who are in lockstep with them. It's just funny to hear them kind of argue about, you know, it's funny to hear things from their perspective, because it's just like, I don't know, it's like, it honestly they would profess themselves to have principles that are, you know, objective and outside of society. But I would say that their principles, their real principle isn't the ones that the society holds. It is the principle of, begins with the principle of, I will go along with what is popular and what is popular in our society. And then from that one principle, this entire intellectual framework pops up around it and then justifies it, right? But I think that at the end of the day, it's based on, it's a house built on sand. It's not built on rock. And I feel like potentially, maybe if the society falls apart and people stop supporting it or whatever, if it becomes unpopular, then these people might change their tune as well. And I'd say that's true to an extent. But I'd also say that we have psychology and neurobiology to worry about here, because once you hit 25, your brain stops developing. I think once you hit 30, your intelligence moves like rapidly from like crystal or from fluid intelligence to like crystallized intelligence, right? You can't really change the way you think, and it's not like, oh, it just happens when you turn 30. It's like, it's a process, you know. When you're younger, you have fluid intelligence. You can change your mind and your views and your understanding of the world. But then once you hit a certain age, like, it becomes much harder to kind of change that. So I think that's another problem that we might see, you know. If society changes more and more and more, than the people who's really the intellectuals whose only principle really is do what's popular. Some of them are going to change, but I think a lot of them, because of their crystallized intelligence of being older, they're not going to be able to adapt, and they're going to probably still stick to their guns of neoliberalism. And I think that's where the loyalists come from, people who are supporting the old position, even though the flaws are made apparent and an improved system is kind of offering itself up. These people will never change, I'd say. Some of them. The other people, they just go along with whatever is popular, which is just, I don't know. Let's talk about that for a second, and then I'll end this podcast. I hate the word podcast. Oh, gosh. But I really don't like that principle of just do what's popular. I really don't like it. And this is honestly coming from, I'd say that I'm not I'd say that the way that I think about reality, like if everyone thought the way I think society would probably collapse. Because I don't know, I genuinely don't really care about what other people think about politics or whatever. If they think, oh well, no, actually that's the right way. It's like, I don't know. I think that one of the only real things that I've used to justify things is pragmatism. Like, does the system work? Is it something that'll be something that is, if it works, then cool. And popularity doesn't really come into my into kind of what I believe is true. Not very much. I'd say that what I do resort to, which is different, I would say, is deferring judgment of things that I am not well versed in to people who are more well versed in and more well read and studied in than I am. So like let's say theology. Someone's read a lot more books on theology than I have, then I'll listen to what they have to say and what their insights are, and I'll probably accept their insights tentatively. Or if someone understands things about politics and philosophy and stuff like that, I'll probably listen to them and I'll say, you know what, that makes sense. And I'll see where that leads me and everything else. But popularity is something that doesn't really come into my field of view. And I think it's just because I'm creative, which is not a... You can say, well, you can't call yourself that. It's like, bro, I think that's the only redeeming quality of myself. I think that's the only thing that I'm good at. I'm just creative. I'm not the smartest. I'm not not anything else, but I am creative. So that's I'm going to give myself that credit. So anyway, and creativity is something that isn't just default good. Like it's a risky evolutionary strategy, but it could also be rewarding if necessary. But anyway, I've talked enough about that. My point is that the default of humanity is to go along with what is popular, to follow the herd. And this is true from people who are extremely intelligent to people who are very stupid. And this is the safest strategy, because let's say you were in a area with a tyrannical ruler, right? If everyone is acting like a herd, right? Is the ruler just going to kill everybody? Like, that wouldn't make any sense. Then you wouldn't be a ruler anymore, right? The rulers are going to go after the herd. It's going to go after individuals who are sticking their neck out, right? Because those are the threats to him. It's like the Genghis Khan problem. Like, if there's a bunch of people standing, he would line people up, and then if someone was like above a certain height, you'd say, okay, this is the guy who's the standard, and then everyone who's taller than this guy gets killed. It's like that's how human history has worked. The extremes. There's a larger selection bias on killing the extremes than there is on killing the average, right? So what people do essentially is they on average, I would say probably 70-80% of people default to going along with the collective intelligence of everyone else in that society without really thinking much about like what they're actually doing. And then they just say, okay, you know what, everyone's thinking of this, I'm just going to do this. And from just going along what everyone else does, they're much more likely to survive. They're much more likely to survive because they're not sticking their head out. And you don't need to have principles. You just need to act like you do, even though you only have one principle. It's a Chinese room problem. It's like, the Chinese room where someone's in a room and then they're given a bunch of Chinese characters without really seeing anything on the outside. And they have a book that has a bunch of rules and they just follow the rules and then they output other Chinese characters and what they're actually doing on the outside of the room is like, it's like you put in words and then words come out and it's like it's talking to you, right? But what's actually happening is it's just following like a stupid rule system that isn't conscious or really aware of what it's doing. And I'd say that this is how most people operate in terms of high-level ideologies. People don't really think about what's going on. They just live according to these base-level genetic principles of follow along with whatever everyone else is doing or else you're going to die. And that's a very powerful principle. It's a very powerful principle. And to say that, oh, that's just stupid is... If it sounded like that, if I sounded like I was saying that, then that's on me, my bad. But it's not a stupid principle. It's smart for society. That being said, I don't like it. I really don't like it. I think I really hate that the principle of, you know what, I'm just going to go along with what everyone else says, because I'd say that society is actually a lot stupider than in terms of what people think that they want. Society is a lot stupider than, well, it's really, I don't know. I really think it's just unprincipled, it's stupid, and it is fraught with problems and immorality. And you really need to think deeply about what you are consciously doing in order to, live a good life, but, to create a functioning society. Now, I will say the collective intelligence of humanity, when applied to like a market system or some other form of system that is not based on, that is selected for intelligence rather than on the average, because my point here is like the average is determined by democracy. Democracy is idiotic. Democracy is idiotic because most people, the average IQ is 100. For white people in the United States. Average IQ is 100. An IQ below 100 is stupid, is like really stupid. An IQ up to maybe 120 is like, you're a midwit level ideology. And most people, like probably 70 to 80+% of people are below that. It's like, okay. Now, that's not a value judgment of like, okay, well, there can be, I'd say that there can be very good principled and very, very well-principled people with like, like lower levels of intelligence, right? But on the collective, a bunch of people with low levels of intelligence aren't going to come up with very good ideas. And they're also more susceptible to, being convinced of idiotic things like, oh, we just need to give free healthcare to everybody, whatever. And that's what democracy does. Democracy selects for the average, and the average votes stupidly. And that is also how the culture goes. The culture goes for the average. Culture goes for the stupid average because the average is stupid, right? IQ 100 and below is really stupid. Now, where are we going with this? But the alternative, which is really amazing, is a market economy. Now, a market economy, I'll go into that, but I'll go into that in a second. But there's a market economy, and there's probably other forms of, a different selection mechanism for utilizing the computational power of all humans, which is amazing. We need that. There's probably other ways, but the best system that I see that we have to harness this right now is an economic system. And what it does, which is amazing, is it selects for intelligence. Because more intelligent people, on average, tend to make more money than people who are less intelligent on average. So what a market economy does is it gives intelligent people a huge vote. It gives them, hundreds of thousands or millions or billions of dollars. And their vote is where they put the money. What are they deciding to invest in? What are they deciding to generate, And by doing so, society has changed and developed. And you can't fake that. You can't go around how the money is spent, because it's not like a nebulous thing. It's a real symbol for human time and economic potential. That is what money is, right? And the computation occurs when you spend it, right? When you make the judgment and decision to, I'll put my money into this and I'll invest it here, right? And by doing that, if you do that trillions of times with everyone's spending in the entire society, then as a whole, you end up making decisions on how everyone's time and energy is spent. And it's a form of a supercomputer, I'd say. And the reason why it works, I would say, the reason why it's better than a democratic system of that type of a supercomputer or whatever, is because it is selected for intelligence. Smart people get the bigger vote. And anyway, gosh, this was quite a ramble, but anyway, the point being that I don't like the principle of just going along with what everyone else says, even though it's a good survival strategy. And I don't know. I guess the final thoughts would be, if you, well, and I'd say everyone has this to an extent, unless you're completely deranged. But everyone is socialized and, goes along with the crowd to an extent. Some people do it more than others, but everyone does it to some extent. And I'd say that if you're if you're to the extreme level, you see that your thoughts and the way that you see and understand the world is shaped by this fundamentally, then maybe you gotta use your conscious mind to think yourself out of this. You gotta say, okay, I am influenced too much by what is popular and what is, a safe idea to have. And genetically, that is really what I want to do, and I can't really, it's going to hurt to think otherwise. But I would say that just going forward into our future, we got to start thinking differently about things, because I don't think our system right now I don't think this is a system that'll allow humanity to survive forever. So we need a change, and we will change. Things will get better, I would say, after this civilizational cycle ends. But I don't know. It would be helpful if more people thought about this. So if you find yourself being convinced too much by the majority, then maybe try and just realize that is what it is, and then try thinking about an alternative while you still have crystallized intelligence and while you still can think in an alternative way. Anyway, I think I've made my points. Hopefully it didn't sound too condescending or whatever, but I'm just trying to think out loud here, and I want to say sorry to all the liberal arts majors. I don't want to make you feel bad about yourselves. I just think that it's a not questionable decision. Well, I don't know. It's a questionable decision to get a degree in that, especially today, especially when degrees are so devalued. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm just, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I have a little bit of animosity towards the artoid archetype. Ugh. I didn't mean to offend. All right. Love you guys. Check out Gustav.com. DM me on Gustav. Email me at quantumsnav@gmail.com. Yeah. All right. Love you guys. See you later.